Hi drawing students, I wanted to send you a video going over what we talked about in our Zoom meeting the other day. Some of you weren't there and I wanted you to be able to have a verbal explanation of our next assignment. I will be posting an assignment packet as well. You've gotten these for a lot of your other assignments, so it should look fairly familiar. Unfortunately, my Zoom meeting didn't record or didn't save properly, or is in the bellows of one of my hard drives. I'm not really sure where it went. So you get a brand new video. In our meeting, we reviewed how to draw in perspective, and I'm going to also attach a packet with more detail on drawing in perspective. Now, this packet is written like an assignment. You're not required to complete that as assignment. It's just a little bit more detailed explanation, something that you can have right next to you as you're trying to work out how to draw in perspective as opposed to the PowerPoints like we did last week. I also will include a screenshot of the whiteboard that we worked on during our video during the Zoom meeting, and that has just some good vocabulary for perspective drawing. Some words in perspective drawing should be familiar to you from your math classes, like parallel and intersecting, converging. But there might be some new words like linear perspective as opposed to optical perspective. So take a look at that, and that should help you with some of that. Now, for the fun part. So we have 2-point perspective drawing, and we're going to draw birdhouses. So here's a student example right here. And the basic requirements are right here, so you can make sure you're fulfilling all of those requirements. There's just a few guidelines I wanted to have so that the students were being sure to create a final project using some of their creative skills that they've and also some of the skills that they've learned throughout the year. We're just kind of each unit, if you will, we're stacking on more and more things that we've learned throughout the year. So this one, so I want you to have 6 birdhouses, at least 6 birdhouses. You should have some unique things about each birdhouse. That might be their size, their shape, their color, texture. So at some point, as you're putting your final touches on these birdhouses, there should be some differences. And there should be some birdhouses that are below the horizon line and some that are above the horizon line. If there are some that are on the horizon line, that's fine as well. I also would like to see 6 other objects other than the birdhouses. So think trees, fences, different animals, bird bath. So be creative, and also need you to do a complete background. So your whole page should be filled. This is a final project. Yeah, and then at the end, once you've drawn everything, then you need to add color. So primarily most of it should be in color. Now for this assignment, you can choose whatever materials you have at home to create the color. So all of you should have colored pencils. So certainly that's the first choice you can expect to use. But if you have other materials at home that you want to try out, like oil pastels, maybe you're a painter, you're welcome to use those. I just don't want to see like some elementary school Crayola crayons and Crayola markers. There are some artist markers, which I think sometimes they're called advertising markers. You're welcome to use those. those come out nice. So we want to keep in mind whatever medium we use, we're still able to maintain good craftsmanship. And like always, we'll be on sketch paper, at least 9 by 12, but certainly if you have a bigger size, that is fine as well. And as you're drawing, think about maybe a theme to create some unity in your picture. So, for example, this one here is just kind of an outdoorsy theme with different, and then they've got different textures here on each of the buildings. Certainly that's not a requirement that there's like a defined theme, but it might help you with some the creative elements. And remember when we talked in the principles of art, we talked about unity, so that would offer some unity in your project. All right, going forward here, the first step is just a general layout. You're going to put your horizon line, vanishing point. Those are things that you're always going to start with when you're doing a perspective drawing, just to start where your guidelines are. So as you can see here, the horizon line is directly in the center in this person, you know, if this were to be someone's artwork. But it doesn't have to be directly in, so don't worry about measuring. You'll be happy to know that perspective drawing is a little bit less measuring than what we've done with some of our other things. But you will need a ruler, a pencil that will erase well, and a good eraser so that you don't damage your paper. And then step 2 is to start constructing your birdhouses. So this goes through in extreme detail on the process of that. And so you'll go through and you'll complete one birdhouse, and you'll erase all your receding lines, and then you'll move on to another birdhouse, and you'll do this 6 times. There's one thing I wanted to point out. I added in a little bit more explanation to the main steps to creating the main structure, and a lot of these should be familiar to you if you drew the cube in the assignment for last week. But drawing the bottom side of the birdhouse, if it's above the horizon line, you'll be able to see underneath the birdhouse. So pay close attention here and read through and look at the diagrams, because between those two things you should be able to figure it out. You're welcome to print this out in black and white, but just so you know, there are times where I reference a color line. So if you're having trouble, you might want to print it out in color. Otherwise, if you're feeling pretty comfortable with the process, black and white should be fine. So then it goes into explaining on how to add a roof to each of your birdhouses, and your roofs can be different in each one. So for example, these instructions show you how to have the peak of your roof centered by doing that X on the face here, and that's going to determine where the middle of the face of the birdhouse is. But if you were to be adding, you know, a creative little twist to it, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that if you wanted to have an off-centered roof. But I would suggest that if you do choose to do that, if that's like a artistic creative choice that you're making, make sure it's obvious enough that we know that's what you're doing, as opposed to you messed up or missed a step. Then it starts to get a little bit tricky and tedious, but hang with it, because once you get through the first one, second one, the rest from there should be pretty easy, and you'll have all the steps. You won't have to check back quite as often to your worksheet. So the first one can feel a little tedious, maybe the second one too, but stick with it and it will be fine. So here we're going to, instead of just having a flat roof that's flush to the wall, like most birdhouses or any typical house, the roof has an overhang. So this is going to go through some very detailed instructions on how you want to do that. And then adding some thickness to your roof, because it's not paper thin, it's a thick, let's say piece of wood or something. So the next instructions will explain that for you. Alright, and then there's two different ways that you could finalize your corners here of your roof. So after you've added that thickness, you kind of have to choose how you want to stylize your corners. They can all be in choice 1, they can all be in choice 2, you can have a variety. However you choose, whatever you think is easiest is fine as well. So yes, and let's see. So then the next step is to start adding details to your birdhouse. So details like the door, if you choose to do a round door, pretty easy. If you choose to do a rectangle door, just follow the basic perspective rules that you've been using all along. Also consider adding a landing stick, and there are other things you can add to your houses to make them each their own unique house. I'm thinking like windows, additions, porches, ladders. So have fun, be creative. And at this point, please be sure to erase all of your receding lines. It's prompting you to do that throughout at some good times for that. But definitely once the general construction of each birdhouse is done, go through and erase so that those receding lines don't mess with the next birdhouse you do. So like I said, now you're going to go through and you're going to finish drawing all the other birdhouses. Next step is to add additional details. Remember, I want you to add at least 6 additional details that will be very noticeable to me. I'll be able to count them out just looking at the picture. And this is just an effort to not force you to draw the picture the way I want you to, but to push you outside the box a little bit and push you to add some creativity, as opposed to, well, I drew 6 birdhouses, now I'm done. So be creative, have fun with it, make it personal to you maybe, if that helps. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you come up with. And then so some other details that you can add, it kind of gives you some ideas here, but you might be adding some texture at this point because you're still working in pencil. So there are some texture elements that you might want to add before you bring out the color, however you choose to do the color. And any other little details, like you'll want to get the tree drawn in there before you color the background or what have you. So, and again, you're going to have a background. So are you going to keep that original horizon line there? Or, for example, with the first one we were looking at earlier. So as the artist started this and was drawing the birdhouses in perspective, they probably had their horizon line kind of going like this. But now they've added some variation to that horizon line. So that was just, the original horizon line was just as a guide as they're going through, but now they made it a little bit more interesting. So keep that in mind as an option. There's another one here that I thought was kind of a neat way to add a background. It had a fence in it. Let's see. Like this one right here, you can't probably see it very well, but they probably had a horizon line right here, but then they popped up a fence right there. I thought that was a really neat way to do that. Okay, so now that you have everything sketched out, everything's in pencil, receding lines, lines that you don't want there anymore are erased, you can start adding color. So if you have use whatever you have at home. If you want to use more than one medium, that's fine, but again, please make sure that it doesn't compromise your craftsmanship. We want this to present this with good craftsmanship, which means we want to present this project with pride. So I hope you have fun with this, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And oh, also due dates. So this is a lot of work. Don't feel overwhelmed. It's not due next week. Work on it at your own pace, but my recommendation would be next week is March 31st, next Tuesday. So I would like to have your houses drawn out. So all the perspective drawings done, if there's any additions or things like that, extensions of the house that you need to do, have that done by next week. So your paper should still have pencil in the general horizon line. And take a picture, scan a copy, and attach that to the assignment on the website. And that will be kind of our little check-in, a good goal as to where you should be. Now, April 7th, Tuesday, April 7th, we don't have any classes. So you don't have to check in with me necessarily. But my goal for you would be to have all of your details drawn out, making sure that you've kind of fulfilled all those requirements on the first page, and then start coloring. Maybe at this point you have your background, maybe your details done. So maybe like your birds are drawn, or maybe if your background doesn't conflict with too many of the details, your background is done. So just start getting some color on, because that should be a fairly big undertaking. So then by the week after that is Tuesday, April 14th, I want the final project. So if we're still not at Calvary, meeting face to face, just scan that in, take a picture, scan it, however you choose to get it to me, and attach it to the assignment on the website. That will be the easiest way for me to collect them all in one place. And if you haven't read my little note, I think it was last week, about Adobe Scan, that's a nice app that takes really good, it allows you to crop, and it just takes a really good picture of your either artwork or your worksheet that you're sending to your teacher. So check that out. That's made things really easy around here for us, and we found that if we send a copy as opposed to a link or anything like that, it comes through to the other person a lot easier. So scroll back and check that out as well. And I think that's it for now. Please, again, leave me any questions. I hope you're having a good week. Miss you guys. Bye.